Welcome to SOULWITH. I'm your host, Luke JJ. The term SOULWITH was first coined in 2009 by an anonymous online poet. It refers to society's lack of connection with others and themselves due to the increased attention to the internet or bandwidth, thus narrowing the soul width. We have seen the internet take hold of decisions, choices, votes, friendships, and love life. We aren't saying to give up the internet, that would be a little bit hypocritical. I mean, you're listening to my voice via the beauty formed through society's imagination. At SOULWITH, we believe that by fusing innovation and traditional intelligence, we can steer our course with technology, the internet, AI, and innovation in a manner that avoids a Terminator 2 Judgment Day situation. We're here to remind you to give attention to your soul width. You have an inner voice. Explore it deeply. Anything you hear in the shallow may or may not be your voice, as you'll discover in this podcast. So, in that spirit, we bring to your eardrums the vibration of inspiration and intelligence from a shaman, spiritual counselor, and energy healer. His name is Matthew Greenwood. In this episode, Matthew shares his remarkable journey from furniture maker to shaman, sparked by a life-changing calling. He'll explain what is a shaman and how he connects with guides. And I ask him if I have guides around me right in the middle of the podcast, but you'll have to find out the results and listen. Thank you for listening to SOULWITH. So here's my pitch. SOULWITH is 100% independent, but I really want to share my creation with others, plus 10% of profits will go to charity each month. I don't feel like 10% is enough, and the only way I can increase that is to grow and expand and share my creation with others. By going to shop.soulwith.com, you're supporting the mission to turn down your bandwidth and widen your soul width. Our products include inactive wear, journals, headgear, and accessories. These products are gentle reminders to bring into your moment breath and silence, set aside time for reading, listen to an audiobook, maybe a podcast, and move, exercise, build long-lasting physical strength. So please support our mission. Google SOULWITH, leave a review, visit your preferred social platform, send us the review, send us a message, and we'll give you 15% discount code for shop.soulwith.com. Now, Matthew Greenwood, Shaman. The voice that started it all.
Carving away at a table leg, and this voice separate to me.
The 7-year warning pattern.
Between 2 and 9, I had bronchial asthma. At 16, I had cancer. At 23, I got diabetes.
Meeting a Lakota elder by fate.
And she said, my grandfather is full-blood Oglala Sioux and lives on Pine Ridge.
The inner child isn't a metaphor.
Fracturing of energy, parental energy. It's like a broken record.
Trauma, chakras, and back pain.
People have constant back pain that relates to emotions. You clean that blockage out, the pain goes.
How do you unblock the trauma?
On the SOULWITH Podcast, Matthew Greenwood is a shaman and he is joining us today from Adelaide Hills. As we always start the SOULWITH Podcast, what are the words that brought you here today?
My life changed back in about 1990 and furniture maker by trade. I had my own business, and then I heard a voice out of the blue. I'd never heard anything like this before. This voice said to me, Matthew, there's more to you and there's more to life. You need to find it. At the time, I was actually, probably about a week before, I was actually thinking, is this all there is to me? I was very busy with furniture making. It's like I was looking for something, but I didn't know what. Anyway, I went along to a meditation group after hearing this voice. I should have been surprised too at that voice, but I wasn't. And it just led me to connecting with the right people. It's like I was in this stream of energy. And everything started being attracted to me for this change in direction. So really, essence of what I was looking for was peace and calm in my life. So probably in a nutshell, that's what I was looking for, which I didn't have. So
it's funny that you mentioned that question. Sorry, that statement. Is this it? Because it seems like it's a crossroads of life, because I had that question last year, and in terms of sort of developing this business, I did. I thought that exact statement, is this it? Do you think if like if sometimes if people are thinking in that sort of space, do you think it is some sort of calling? Or because the reason why I ask, because that interpretation of it can be seen two ways. It could be seen as sort of like a pity for the self, a pity for what's happened, or, you know, maybe even being greedy and wanting more. But
Yes.
then also you saw it as a calling, which is a deep spiritual connection, like a tap on the shoulder in a sense.
Very much. It was as if there was someone standing right beside me, literally about, in the old language, about 2 feet away from me, speaking as loud as I'm speaking now. And it was definitely not me, and there was no one else in my workshop. I was actually literally carving away at a table leg for a piece of furniture I was making. And this voice just popped up. It was separate to me. It was outside of me, whereas I connect with spirits and guides, but that's internal. You hear it inside. Whereas this was external, and I'd never had an experience like that before. And it really made me think a lot about my life. I'd never looked back at my life and seen the key things that had happened and the time frames between everything. Between 2 and 9, I had bronchial asthma really bad. I was hospitalized several times. At 16, I had cancer, which was under here, Hodgkin's disease. Then at 23, I got diabetes, and I'm at 29 when I heard this voice. And I'm thinking, my God, I'd started doing the maths, and there was 7 years between each of those prominent medical issues. And I was a year off this next one. And this voice coming in was a warning, really. It was a warning, but also an opportunity to look for more, which is what I was actually needing to do. So it's like I was only living half a life. And as I stepped into this more and more meditation, I started seeing spirits. I started seeing spirit guides, which are a higher evolved level of spirit. And they're solely there to help us to reach our potential. They're actually aspects of our soul that regroup with us. This was starting to, I mean, I could have written a book very easily in the first 12 months of all of the things that started happening. It was like I wasn't even trying, and it was happening. And I knew I was hanging on to a lot of baggage too, because I was trying to think, well, a lot of people spend a lot of money on getting therapy to grow more, to hear spirit or to see spirit. And it was all just happening naturally. And I still had a lot of emotional stuff I needed to work through, which I was. It was very prominent to do that because I know I needed to clear that out of my system as much as I could anyway. And it's still ongoing. I never see that stops.
So what did you do after you got that calling? Because you have a connection to, is it Lakota Nation?
Yeah, it was really interesting. What happens for me, you've got to follow your intuition, your hunches. If you don't, you miss out. We very easily do that when we're stressed. We're in a focus of going from A to B. Suddenly there's something we feel sometimes that's between A and B, but we don't do it because we're in a rush or we just don't even sense it. Whereas what I tend to do in life is really listen and follow those hunches. So what was happening for me pre-2001, probably about 12 months pre-2001, I was in an on-again, off-again relationship, which was driving us both nuts. And, we needed to do something about it because we were getting pulled back together, then separating and so on. So we both decided to see a counsellor that neither one of us knew because we were both counsellors. And we finally found someone that was suggested to us. She was great. She actually helped us to go opposite directions, but in a really good, balanced way. And I thought, I'm getting something out of this, so I'm going to go along for a couple more sessions for myself, because like I said, I knew I had stuff I needed to deal with. Anyway, what happened at that last session, she looked at me and she said, so we were kind of almost at the end of the session. She looked at me and she said, see, we're at the end of this session, and you've kind of got a fresh slate here to start new things. And what goals have you got? What would you like to do in the close vicinity? And I said, well, look, I looked her straight between the eyes and I said, I really want to go to America. And she said, oh, okay, where in America? I said, because I'd done a bit of research, and I said, look, South Dakota of all places, because no one wants to go to South Dakota. They want to go to New York or LA or something. And she looked at me again, a bit deeper, and she said, where in South Dakota? And I said, either Rosebud or Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And she just she was on an office chair with casters on, and she slid the chair back and just laughed her head off. And she said, "My grandfather is full-blood Oglala Sioux and lives on Pine Ridge." I thought, wow. I mean, you couldn't have paid for that. And she just gave me all of this information about the reservations in the mid-north of America. And I just wrote and rang. I could be like a dog with a bone. I won't let things go until I come to a finish. And I ended up getting a real strong heart connection with the chief elder on Rosebud. And we spoke for hours over many, many calls. And he was great. So in 2001, he set me up with a gig actually teaching woodwork in their college. I didn't even know they had a college, didn't know that they had a woodworking school there, and then living with a traditional family. So I was there for just over 5 months. I can't put it into words what I learnt over there just in that short time. Speaking to elders, being a part of ceremonies, even starting to work with medicine men and helping people out on the res. And it was amazing. And working with the young kids that are so eager to learn new things, it was fantastic. So I valued that so much, and I continued to go back probably every 12 months to 2 years. And I ended up eventually getting adopted into 2 families on the reservation, and this is the reservation that is for the Lakota Indians, First Nation people, and
Mhm.
they're just magical people. I just love them, and continued to get taught by elders, and eventually I even started running small tours over there for Aussies to go over and have a Native American experience, staying in teepees, getting driven into a huge herd of like 1,200 buffalo, and which are wild animals, and talking with elders and walking through the tribal lands. And it just goes on, and it was such a magical time. And hopefully I'll be going back again next year. But that's been part of the journey, definite strong foundation for my journey. But yeah, shamanism kicked in probably a little bit before that, where, just to sort of clarify a little bit more about shamanism, if you imagine in a village, say 300 years ago, Native American village, there may be, just a hypothetical, there might be 150, 200 people in the community. And the shaman's role, or a medicine man's role, or a medicine woman's role, and quite often there could be one of each, a medicine man and a medicine woman. The difference from my understanding, the difference between a medicine man and a shaman is a shaman specializes in looking at the bigger picture of what's going on in the reservation. Shaman has an acute understanding and awareness of energy, of what's going on for the community as a whole, energetically, what's going on for individuals, because all it takes is for one individual to be out of balance, and that has a huge effect on the community. So a shaman's role is really to keep that balance flowing, and even down to when to go on a hunt, when to go into battle, the shaman would always be involved in that, and connecting with the spirit world. So further beyond that, with what a shaman does, is to connect with every level of spiritual energy, from just random spirits to the ancestors to galactic beings even, because the majority of native cultures know that they're not from here. It's in their teachings. They're from the stars. And so they've always had a very acute connection with the star people. And I do now too, and have done for about 15 years. And there's quite a lot of action going on that level these days. And so it's a very expansive involvement in other people's lives and helping to keep the balance. So in essence, how I classify myself is I'm there for the people, whoever needs me. I do ceremonies for people. I've done like a secondary wedding ceremony or a secondary funeral. The death process is accepted as you go to a venue, and they go through everyone listening to the person that's running it. What I do afterwards, for those that are interested in, I do a letting go, helping to let go of the spirit so that the spirit can be free. And also it's helping to bring the people together that want to be a part of that as a united force of energy that can help send people sort of on their journey, on their way. And Yes, so and in essence, for one-on-one work, I help people to release trauma. We tend to take on a lot of trauma in our childhood. That we're at our most susceptible up until puberty. And one thing a lot of people don't realize is that a child is actually contained within the mother's aura. It doesn't matter where they are on the planet, but they're actually enveloped in the mother's aura up until puberty. And what happens at puberty, the auras start to separate. And this is where the child is starting to become their own person. And so they're learning how to be independent. And so there's a lot of things that can possibly go a little pear-shaped there, depending on how the child was brought up. And that can really stick with the child. But also there can be trauma through abuse or just sometimes just negative things that are repetitively said to a child. That gets held and quite often suppressed in our energy, and it just sits there and it just plays on how we live, how we communicate, interactions with ourselves, even how we think about ourselves. And so to release that trauma is to really find you, because a lot of us carry a lot of other people's energy, and we don't really know who we are, particularly empaths. Because one thing I noticed when I first got into this was there were so many people that were kind of a victim to their empathy, to their sensitivity. And I thought, this shouldn't be this way. Why is this going on? And it's because of that suppressed energy that we carry really depletes our base chakra energy, which is our connection to the earth and to our confidence and to who we are. If you've got a whole lot of other people's energy caught up in your space, you don't know who you are, because quite often we're running off that energy. So what happens when people release that? They quite often release pain out of their body, because that's where they've been holding on to other people's energy. But they also find freedom. They find themselves. They start to be able to think with more clarity about what they want, and not so much what this other people's energy, like parental energy, that can be caught up in our space, that just keeps playing. It's like a broken record. It just keeps going round and round and round at a subconscious level, playing out the way we look at life. So it's a bit.
When you're talking about other people's energy, are you talking about past lives, or are you talking about the experience that that child has had in that human form?
So there can be both, but what I find when I first started working, I used to do a lot of past life work, and I think that had a lot to do with where the frequency of our environmental energy was. And I could possibly get back into that one. That's another sort of story in itself. But what I found probably going back about 15 years ago, it was more focused on the this life stuff. So what happens in childhood? When we have trauma, and trauma is really, it can be anything. It can be minimal or it can be full on, sexual abuse or physical abuse. But it's all relative to the child. And even at negative statements that are said to us repetitively, could be put downs, it could be just creating fear and anxiety in us, or the way we're treated. This energy is not just the emotional content of what's going on. So when someone's directing that to you in whatever way, shape, or form, generally projection is directed in three different ways. It's directed verbally, physically, or through thought, because there's a lot of thought transference that goes on that we don't realize. So when that projection happens, there's literally an energy with emotions attached to it that we absorb. And when we're kids and in that state of not a defined aura, we do take a lot of stuff on. So what happens with that? When we take it on, you've got two aspects to this energy. There's the emotional content, but there's also the life force of that person. Now, when you're carrying the life force of someone else in your life, you're basically karmically tied to them until you give that life force back. So, if you die and the other person dies that did the projecting, you'll go in and you're going to come back in the next life, different, but it'll be the same energy, because you're there to still clean this up. We come in with the soul comes in to learn certain things. And if we don't learn it, we're going to come back because the soul is wanting evolvement. And so what we can do, we give this
So the
energy
soul
back.
itself is desiring growth. Yeah.
Yes, very much.
That's all right. Keep going. Yeah.
So in this life force that we take on, this is the magical stuff sometimes that a lot of practitioners don't see, because I've done my own journeying for myself through this, because I had a lot of abuse happen when I was a child. And so I was kind of like a classroom for learning about energy. And that was my main focus when I got into this, was I'm a nuts and bolts kind of guy. I like to see what's at the core issue and the foundation. If there's an issue within a person's system, energy system, physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual, I like to go to the source. And so if you're holding on to this life force, I take people through a process where we clear the emotional energy with high frequency energy that we can tap into, which is, I call it God force, that we have within us. So we clean that part of it up. But then I get them in visualization. I get them to bring the spirit of the person that would have been worked out in the journey I'm taking people on, bring them into that space. And then I take them through a ritual where they give that life force back to the person, which actually, whether they're dead or alive, it doesn't matter. But what it does, it creates freedom, not just for the client, but it actually creates more freedom for the other person as well, because that life force is going back to where it should go. And so you do that, then I help them, coming back to the trauma. When that trauma occurs with a child, there's literally a fracturing of energy that happens. And this is what people call an inner child. So literally, wherever that trauma happened, whenever that trauma happened, this separation occurs, and there's this static child that doesn't grow, that's still holding on to that trauma. But as you grow as physically, there's like a wormhole of energy that is not always open, but when you're getting triggered by something, that wormhole of energy opens up, and suddenly you revert back to that child and the pain that child went through. And you don't act like an adult because you're in that child mode. And this is why you see this radical change in people. Sometimes you think, oh, they're a great person. Then all of a sudden, what the hell's going on there? Because suddenly they're reactive. They're being triggered. And you're no longer dealing with an adult. You're dealing with the child. And sometimes you can't get anywhere with that. You just have to wait for them to settle their energy and come back to that, or if you can calm their energy.
Yeah. So in that sort of space, when you're talking about children and trauma, is to communicate with someone who goes into their child body, is it kind of like trying to communicate with an actual baby when you have to sort of hold and nurture and speak calm, but you can't mirror their tantrum, their energy. You have to be as peaceful as possible to take them into your space.
That's right. The problem if you start reacting because they're reacting, and it's like two kids then in a room just going at it. Nothing rational is going to come out of that. So some has to be grounded, and that's what my role is, to be really grounded. And when that child is coming up to the surface, is to just keep them grounded. And this is the big thing that's lacking. When that triggering occurs, the base chakra, which should be flowing down into the earth, just stops. It just stops flowing. Energy on the whole with the energy system, there should be a flow of energy from source externally down through our energy system to the core of the earth. If that's not happening, what occurs is the base chakra shuts down, then energy starts to internally combust. And this is where anything that's suppressed will bubble up to the surface, and this is the inner child stuff that comes up. And so in that process, to finalize just the finish of a session would be me taking them through another little ritual where I help them to embody that inner child. So it's no more separation, no more wormhole, and no more triggering. And that's generally done through shamanic practices like drumming, singing, chanting, to help the energy. Quite often I'm seeing a Native American medicine man that's doing the same thing, and he's channeling through me. It's every time I do that, quite often ask the client, did that help? And they said immensely. I wouldn't have been able to do it without you doing that drumming and the chanting. So it's very grounding.
Because it's about the vibration. You mentioned frequency before, and frequency is about vibration, and it is about sound. It is about that sort of that sort of
Definitely.
what you can't see, but you can hear and you can feel. So I have a question about I guess it's a two-part question. So, a lot of people touch on this about, trauma creating blocks within sort of like personality and evolution of the self. For anyone who's just sort of like starting to get into their soulful side, their spiritual side, connecting to their body and, the essence of them, why does trauma block?
So this is when we start to get into the conversation of frequency. So our body on a good day, should naturally be running at a range of frequencies. Every part of us is at a slightly different frequency. But on a whole, if everything's running well, then everything's interacting. Energy in an aura there's constant flow and movement. It's like a really graceful dance of energy. The stumbling block is old emotional energy, which is generally tainted with a lot of emotions, whether it be our emotions or someone else's emotions, and that's very low frequency. So low frequency it doesn't flow. It literally stays blocked. And so with the chakra system, I should explain the chakras a little bit. A lot of people have probably heard about chakras or energy centers, but they're a vital part working with a person's energy, with everything, emotions, physical, mental. If a chakra isn't flowing, then there's a reason why that chakra isn't flowing. And it's generally because of trauma, because chakras are where we draw in information. So they're very necessary for us to grow. But what tends to happen is when we've had trauma, it tends to sit in the back of the chakras. I don't want to get too complicated here, but the chakras go right through the body. They're not just at the front. And so trauma sits at the back.
Okay.
And the front of the chakras relate to how we present ourselves to the world and to people because of the blocked energy at the back. Now, what that's also doing, if there is blocked energy at the back, it means there's less energy flowing, less life force flowing through those energy centers, which then minimizes our capability of feeling different things. We'll just use the heart for an example. We not only feel love for other people, but also love for ourselves through the heart chakra. We feel love for animals, a forest, when you step into a forest, And when the energy is blocked, it really minimizes the amount that we can get out of a relationship, out of a conversation, out of an experience. And so, if people are feeling that they're cold and they're not open, feeling shut down, it generally relates to not just one or two block chakras, can be many, but definitely the base chakra there's like a ricochet effect that happens. If you've got chakras that are blocked at anywhere from the base up, which is between the legs pointing straight down, then the base chakra will be heavily affected as well. But in turn, when the base chakra is open, this is magical for your higher senses, because the base chakra is like the foundation of a skyscraper. It has to be strong and stable. And what this does then, it opens our awareness to all kinds of things, not just to spiritual experiences like seeing guides or spirits or seeing auras. It actually literally opens us up to music, to being musical, to amazing experiences, potential of what you're capable of. But it's that heart stuff and particularly base chakra stuff that definitely minimizes our ability to have a full life experience. And this is all about emotions that we hang on to.
So you're mentioning about chakras being blocked and the base chakra in terms of being affected. Are there clues? Is there sort of like things that you can sort of see to understand that it is blocked?
Yes.
Like, is getting sick all the time meaning that it's blocked? Is getting angry all the time meaning that it's blocked?
Yep.
Is trying to do something and then constantly not being able to do it.
Most definitely.
Wanting to be in a relationship and you just keep on sort of going through the same pattern all over again.
And the patterns that keep occurring is the energy that's more often than not ours, that is locked up in our energy system somewhere, that has a dialogue of its own, because that dialogue relates to the person that projected that energy at you in your childhood. And so that dialogue is running, whether inside of you, whether it means it's about, am I good? I'm not good enough, or how could they love me? Fear of, say, even something simple like going for a job, and I'm not. You're probably overqualified, but not. They don't feel they are. They don't feel they're good enough for that. And this is the thing, people that are interviewing, they would feel all of that. They may not be able to sum it up into words, but they will feel that those insecurities, and they're going to question, oh, is this person, he's on paper, he looks good, but he may not be able to hold his space in there, and may not be able to bring everything forward, which he probably can't because of what he's hanging on to. So we can have a look at a few chakras. The third eye, the classic thing people think about with the third eye is being able to see beyond physical. But it's not just about that. It's also, this is where we process information too, on all levels. So when the third eye chakra is blocked, it's very difficult to have clarity of thought because there's just a lot of chaos up here. If you've got a lot of stress in your life, there's a lot of things you're worried about. Base chakra is all about being in present time, being in the moment, and experiencing things, and that joy of every little breath. There's wonderment in that. The problem is when the base chakra is shut down, you're constantly reverting back to your past because there's a link back to that through wounded child. So even if it's not conscious, you're constantly bouncing back and forward. But that also can relate to being fearful of what's coming into the future. And so you're kind of bouncing way back and forward, and you're anywhere but in the middle, in the moment. And this is where people's energy is scattered. It's not here. And that's because there's a lot of the time that's base chakra stuff. And a lot of people feel that. And probably one of the biggest things that's happening at the moment, or has been happening fairly heavily for about the last 15, 16 years. What happened about 16 years ago, I noticed it at a very subtle level, and I'm pretty tuned into energy. And I thought, what is that? Because, you get different energy with the different moon cycles, but it wasn't moon cycle energy. It was like it just jumped up, the frequency of our environmental energy just jumped up a little bit. So I thought I'll just keep a track of this and see what's going on with it. And I found it was continuing. It was only a little bit, but it would continue. And so it's been happening like that for the last 16 years. Now, I talked to someone years ago that was an astrologer, and she said to me, oh, I know what you're talking about. I couldn't remember the name of the cycle, but apparently we're in a 96-year cycle that is all about this is the prelude to what they call, and a lot of the native cultures are very conscious of this time that's coming, which is called the golden age of humanity. And what we're in is the lead up to the golden age, where it's 1,000 years of peace and harmony. It doesn't seem that way that we're going to get there at the moment, but that's where we're heading. And we've got another 80 years or so to go of this raising in frequency. So what's happening over this period of time is people's buttons are getting pushed more and more as frequency continues to rise, because what happens is, here's a person's energy. If they've got any low frequency energy sitting around here somewhere in the belly area or anywhere in their energy system, as frequency continues to rise, that cannot contain itself and keep itself there. It has to bubble up to the surface. So it's very difficult, where humans get into a habit of suppressing, and so it's almost impossible to do that anymore. We have to deal with stuff, or else we implode and we become a bit internally or externally combustible. So this frequency is a constant in our lifetime, and probably in our children's lifetime. This is going to be continuing. So we have to learn to work with this, to maintain this. So I take people through a process, all of my clients and anyone that I work with, through a grounding exercise, which doesn't take a long time, to help them to keep grounded, and also a process where they raise their frequency continuously, which helps two things. You begin to get in balance with environmental frequency, but also you're actually pushing that negative stuff up to the surface too, so you can deal with it. And it works extremely well. Because I've been noticing, I've been noticing over the years just how impactful this higher frequency is to people. And so I feel like a broken record sometimes to a lot of my clients, but they get it. They know that when they're doing that grounding exercise on a regular basis, they feel great. But as soon as they forget or stop, or they're getting stressed, and that tends to help make people forget about what they should be doing, yeah, everything starts to go topsy-turvy.
It's funny that you mentioned grounding, because I was actually going to ask this question in a sense, and it wasn't a question in my notes, but I'm going through a book at the moment which is all about quantum physics and relativity. And one of the points that they were talking about was how the universe is established in terms of space and the way that the Earth moves, and how everything is attracted to the Earth. Everything is sent to the Earth. You drop something out of the sky, it goes to the ground. It's got to do with Newton's law and things like that. And we have this energy force that you talk about, and then we have these sort of scientific laws. I mean, there's no necessarily way that you can prove that they're connected, but through your energy, can you, do you have an inclination of that connection between what the universe and laws and physics tell us to the energy that you feel?
So a classic comparison, and this is bringing in very obvious science, very practical information that everyone would have heard of or would understand, with an electrical system. So we are an electrical system. There is an electrical system within our bodies. We're no different to a car or a house electrical system. If the electrical system in a house isn't grounded, if somehow you put a pick or a shovel through that grounding cable that goes into the earth, the house electrical system will not function properly. Same with a car, exactly the same thing. So, a car and a house have fuses or, little switches. We know that are there to re-trigger things, but our triggering is probably our chakra system and our parts of our physical body. So one of the classic things with our electrical system is when there's been trauma, what people may have heard of is the meridian energy. So meridian energy carries electrical conductivity. And
You talk about meridian energy, and I'm very sure that in Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, they talk about meridian energy,
do they?
which is
I've never noticed that.
I'm very sure. Yeah, I'm very sure that when Qui-Gon his character does a scan of young Anakin, he talks about meridian. He talks about his meridian energy.
Okay, well, I mean, it's a factual thing. There's a practice. There's textbooks. It's quantifiable within us on a scientific level. And yeah, when there's trauma, literally a meridian line. So there are meridian lines that run down throughout the body. And quite often, depending on where the trauma was and what it relates to on an emotional level, you can have a part of the meridian energy that shuts down. It just becomes blocked with that density of trauma. And that can really affect the thought processes of a person. And this work is great to do on kids because they're so moldable isn't the right word. They're so open to change. We tend to get a bit stubborn around change as we get older. But with kids, they're very open to change. And if you can work with a child, I have done over the years with young kids like around 7 years and up. And you can't counsel her. It's very difficult to counsel a 7-year-old. Just trying to keep their attention for 15 minutes is difficult. But putting them on a massage table and all they got to do is lay there, I make sure their parent is there. And all I'm doing is touching points on the body. And this helps to open up the electrical energy. The amount of improvement that can occur by just keeping that electrical energy running proficiently is amazing. It even still surprises me sometimes because there can be fear, anxiety. A child can even have taken on fear and anxiety from their parents in the birth process or in growing up. Just that in itself, just by taking that energy on, that creates disturbances in the meridian energy and other parts of the energy too. But you open up those energy lines and that fear can disperse because it can create silly things like one child, I remember, she wouldn't walk up steps. She would not go up and down steps without her mother being there. She wouldn't interact with the kids at school. Very difficult for her to get out in front of the class and read a few sentences from my book. She wouldn't interact a lot with the other kids, and she had fear of touching a dog. For her, I mean, I had the perfect playground for her in my house because there were 3 steps from the healing room up until the rest of the house where she would normally go to the toilet at least once through the time she was there. I had a little dog that was just, I mean, he was older and he would just lay there. And you could see she wanted to go over, but she was scared to. Anyway, after 2 sessions, she was walking up and down the steps by herself quite easily. Her mother was kind of pulled back. She was picking her child up from the school, and the teacher came over to her and said, "Oh, I've got to talk to you about something." And mother's going, "No, what's going on now?" She said, "What have you been doing? What have you done for your daughter?" And she said, "What do you mean?" "Well, she's interacting with the kids. She's not scared anymore. She's really just like one of the rest of the kids." So simple things like that can happen, which feel like personality traits or disorders that may take, if it's left, if you don't actually deal with the source of it, I mean, God, you could be going to a psychiatrist for years down the track, you know, whereas you get it sorted early on and it's no issue. So it's very close to being looked upon as magic, what this work that I do and other people do. But it's not. It's quantifiable energy that is there. The Russians have a really good Kirlian photography. Now, Kirlian photography is about being able to read auras with a camera.
I had that done a few years ago. I was at this crystal shop in the middle of nowhere, and I had my aura taken, and I remember how much pain I was in general, physical and sort of psychological as well. I had a lot of back pain, and I remember the photo and the person telling me that you need to start going on a journey to bring more joy into your world. I wish I still had that photo.
You've said this a couple of times about problems with the back. This is a classic case of looking at the chakras, because I can put money on the fact that if you look at the emotional issues that are going on with someone, it'll relate to one of the chakras, because each chakra relates to certain emotions and everything. But if there's a blockage in one of the chakras, you can put money on the fact that they're going to have back problems in line with that chakra, because this density of old emotional energy stops life force flowing through. So I need to kind of quantify what life force is, because a lot of people know the word, but they don't understand what it does. So we breathe in oxygen. That keeps us alive. But life force is another commodity that we actually can't do without. We die without life force. So that life force actually feeds the chakra system, which then in turn feeds the physical, it feeds the mental bodies, the emotional bodies, and the spiritual bodies within the auric field. And so if there's a blockage in one of those chakras, it will literally, very much minimized to almost block completely the amount of life force flowing into that part of the physical body. And of course, if it is a chakra, it's going to be going right through the spine at some point. And people have constant back problems, but they're not dealing with the reason why they've got back problems. A lot of people's pain, what they think is physical pain, is not. It's energetic pain that relates to emotions and blockages. You clean that blockage out, suddenly life force is flowing through there beautifully. Guess what? The pain goes. And I work with this all the time.
So in terms of unblocking these chakras, I mean,
Yes.
I can, like, for me, I mean, in terms of exiting my back pain, there was a whole lifestyle that I had to change, really transformative, from everything from the physical to the way that I talk, to the way that I look, to the way that I accept things about myself, to the way that I accept things about other people, to the decisions of what food I put into my body, to the decisions of what thoughts I put into my body. So a whole transformation of doing that to get to this point of feeling healthy and feeling good and feeling well about myself. Like, that's a huge journey.
Yeah, it
But
is.
there is this other aspect that you are able to deliver, where there's a whole spiritual acceptance that can occur. And in that transformative space,
Yes.
clearing the negative energy is it a process, or is it also something that, like, for example, if I don't believe in what you're doing, does that mean I am going to constantly block it?
Yes. It
Yes.
can do. It can do. Yeah.
Yes.
With
Is there ways
people,
to overcome that?
yes. So with people that don't have that belief, I mean, you got to look at that. If they don't believe in, they're not open enough to try something new, and their belief system is just completely shut down to sort of anything other than a medical doctor, then it's going to be difficult, because part of them actually doesn't want to change. And this is the thing I can be up against sometimes. And generally, I'll work that out pretty soon in a session, and I won't even charge a person. I'll basically give them a choice. I will say to them, okay, look, let's look at this. I don't get angry about it. You have a choice here. You can actually open your mind a little bit and just be a little bit more flexible, and you just never know what might happen if you just follow my lead and let me guide you through this process. Or you can walk out the door and you don't have to see me again. The choice is yours. So this is where putting the responsibility back on the client is really necessary, because they have to make a choice. They're actually being confronted with the fact that they can have a choice to stay exactly the same way they are if they want to. That you put that into them, and they go, kind of going, oh, do I really want to be here? And that this is ego stuff. This is, you can't get through. I've heard this before too. You can't get through, me. No one seems to be able to read me, and generally I can read them like a book energetically, but clearing old energy is a different story with someone. But I will always bring it back to that. These days I'm a bit spoiled, because the majority of people that do come to see me are very spiritual. I mean, I work with a lot of practitioners these days, but I still have beginners coming to see me too. I just love doing this, because people feel fairly quickly, within an hour and a half, and sometimes sooner, they feel changes happening. It's that feeling of lightness within their body. And I'm not massaging them. They're sitting down in a chair opposite me, and I'm getting them to do a lot of the work. And this is about taking responsibility back, because I'm also giving them tools as I do take them through this process, so that eventually they'll be able to do it for themselves. When some emotional baggage bubbles up to the surface, they'll go, oh, I could take myself to the forest where Matt has taken me, and we can step into the fire and release some stuff and blah, 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 go through that process, and they start to catch on, and I don't want to be seeing the same people week after week. I want growth to be happening, and people to become independent, to be able to. But look, there's always times, even when you've been doing spiritual growth for a long time, where there's something bubbling up that you're in the middle of, and you're not objective anymore when you're in the middle of something. And so that's when people come back to see me, and I love it. I love helping them, because generally people that have come to see me a few times, we crack through it really quickly, and then we use the rest of the time for doing something else, that's quite productive, helping them to talk to spirit guides or galactic beings or something. It can be very fun and dynamic.
That's a really good segue for that, because when I was talking to Nicole on that podcast that I was recording with her, she mentioned
Yep.
how she came to see you for the first time, and she mentioned how guides had been with you before she arrived, that they'd been there for a few days, in anticipation for her. I've been wondering for the last couple of days, have you had any of my guides around you? I really wanted to text you and ask you, but I thought, let's leave it for the podcast.
You've got me on the spot now. No,
Yeah, I know.
I felt the energy of one particular guide, and I'm just tuning into. It's a male. I'm just tuning into him, and he is actually Native American. There's a reason why there's a lot of Native American guides. I can get into that later, but confirming to me that you've spent life experiences in many different cultures over the span of your soul's experiences on this planet. But he says that the Native American lives were something that you really felt at peace with, and your connection to the earth, to nature and forests and animals, birds, insects, everything, just the elements, that was your sweet spot, being in those life experiences. So your guide, and this is where we have to then start to talk about what are guides, is another aspect of your soul. So you're one aspect of your soul. Your soul's had many, many, many journeys in other manifestations, physical manifestations. And then there are times when there is a regrouping that goes on. And so for you could say that to say that this was a past life of yours is not quite right. It's another life of your soul's. So you're one aspect of your soul. Your soul's had other aspects. And when there's let's say, a need to have a more developed energy with you to help you to reach your potential, then one of these beautiful manifestations of the soul has done a lot of personal work in their life experience and has grown and has a lot of wisdom. They then will act as a guide for someone else that's on a real strong growth path. So you've got 7 altogether there, but this one is the more prominent one at the moment. And he actually, you must love music because he's got a drum.
Yeah.
He plays the flute, he's got the whole thing going on, and he sings, he'd be a singer. And at the moment I'm seeing him sitting down by a fire and he's got his flute just down beside him. And he's holding his drum and, he would love to spend some time with you. So this is where I teach people how to meditate. And if you do know how to meditate, I just take them on a little journey we create a sacred space. And it's that sacred space where you can go back to anytime and you can just set an intention to connect with that particular guide or any guide. You can put an invite out to your guides to come in and to share who they are and why they're there. So it's all about intentions with this work. It's not, I don't consider myself to be a fluffy person. I'm a pretty grounded person. I'm, like I said to you, I'm a nuts and bolts kind of guy, very practical. But this stuff just makes so much sense when you start to understand energy and the expansiveness of who we actually are. What we see in a mirror is just one little tiny part of us, Experiences for me, like when I talk in front of a group, I don't need any content in front of me because if that group is asking any questions, even questions I don't know, I've got a wealth of information around me there's stuff sometimes that comes out of my mouth when I'm doing talks and I'm thinking, wow, this is great stuff. I really need a USB in my ear to record this.
Yeah, I hear you.
And
I
it just
hear you.
seems to come out of nowhere. Even things like playing the flute. I play the flute too, and I definitely do a lot of drums. I make drums too, and flute is an amazing thing. But when you've got a little bit of help behind you too, with a guide that's there that can play the flute, again, stuff just happens, and you're thinking, no one taught me how to do that, so it's just flowing, and it's a real beautiful experience.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on the music part and the animal part. Oddly enough, I actually worked at a company where it was a hunting organization, and I didn't really think about it, but at the time, but seeing the photos of all the animals, I had to leave after 6 months because it was just hurting me. But the music thing and the nature thing is 100% right. I've always been just really attached to music. I'm teaching myself a keyboard at the moment. I've had drums before in the past. I remember as a kid getting chosen to play the drums and for like some sort of performance that we had. And I've always felt like a really strong tie to America.
Yeah.
Really strong tie to America. So it's interesting that you said all that because it was all right. It's amazing.
Also,
Yeah, it's amazing.
what he's, and you think, you're involved in all of this technology and, which doesn't seem to relate to him, but what's going on here is it's about frequency. It's about sound. It's about getting that right feel to things. And, whether it's technology or something that's right there around you or in front of you or you're a part of, and there's no technology around you, there's still vibration and frequency everywhere. Everything has vibration and frequency. There isn't a thing, even
Yes.
the air has that. We see that there's nothing there. We just think it's oxygen, but there's energy there. When you can see auras and stuff, there's flow of energy. when you see, when you see a flock of birds, like small birds, and they're sort of flying around like this, particularly certain times of night where over a lake, when there's little insects flying around, birds will all be flying in similar patterns because what they're doing is they're following energy, and it's just beautiful to watch.
And thank you, Matt. You can find Matt at greenwoodspiritualjourneys.com.au. SOULWITH is 100% independent. Google SOULWITH, leave a review, visit your preferred social platform, send us the review, send us a message, and we'll give you 15% discount code for shop.soulwith.com. For our next podcast, we have Nick Brax, a mental health advocate, actor, CEO, podcast host of Movie Mind, the son of former Victorian Premier, the man who got me into ice dips and cold showers all the way from LA. Next podcast, we have Nick Brax. I'm your host, Luke JJ.